Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's OR-MEP webinar, where we'll be reviewing the open enrollment application process. My name is Mecca Abraham, the OR-MEP program manager. As you all know, open enrollment round 1 is now open, and we are accepting applications until August 28th. So today we will be going over the process and getting into some more details so you all are prepared to submit those applications. Today we're joining in Zoom today. So I wanted to provide a quick overview on how you can participate. All attendees are currently in listen-only mode and muted. We do, however, want to hear from you if you have any questions. Please enter questions via the Q&A button, and our plan is to take as many questions as we can at the end after we have completed our presentation. Any questions we don't get to will be addressed in our follow-up communication. And to enable captions, you can click on the Show Captions button and select the arrow up icon to select captions in English, as well as translated captions in another language as well. We are recording today's webinar, and we'll make the recording and a PDF of this presentation available on the OR-MEP website that will be shared via email to the OR-MEP mailing list. Here's the planned agenda for today. We'll start off with an overview on OR-MEP and then share about program updates that have now launched, including the website, program manual, and open enrollment. Then we'll dive into the details of open enrollment and the application process, which includes a live demo of the application, doing that together. And then we'll close things out with Q&A. I'm joined today by my colleagues, Julia Sinix, who is the OR-MEP technical manager. She'll share more about the program manual that is now live. Kristen Bellows, OR-MEP marketing manager, is monitoring the Q&A box for questions and any technical issues. And Tim Clark, OR-MEP program manager from the OHCS side and state energy program coordinator. So let's jump into a quick overview on the Oregon Multifamily Energy Program that we refer to in short form as OR-MEP. OR-MEP is brought to you by Oregon Housing and Community Services. The program provides cash incentives and design support for energy efficiency upgrades in affordable multifamily retrofits and new construction. The program is funded through the public purpose charge collected by the 2 main investor-owned utilities, electric utilities in the state, Pacific Power and Portland General Electric. The goal of OR-MEP is to reduce the energy burden for residents with limited incomes across multifamily affordable housing. We do this through promoting energy efficient building design, working with affordable housing owners and developers, and also through energy efficient building use, working with affordable housing residents. To be eligible for OR-MEP, projects must meet the following requirements: be an existing or new construction multifamily property with at least 5 residential units per building. A new update in the program manual is that we are now accepting campuses of 5 or more duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes that are also eligible. Projects must receive electricity from Pacific Power or Portland General Electric. Be heated by a hardwired electrical heating system, and finally, meet the program affordability requirements where residents in at least 50% of the units are at or below 80% area median income, and units must remain affordable for at least 10 years. So now I'll jump into program updates that we recently launched. First up is website updates. We won't go into too many details on the program manual. We did cover many of that in our webinar last May when they were in draft stage. So if you want to dive into those details, you can refer back to that webinar back in May. First up on the website, the OR-MEP website had a slight facelift to improve the user experience and to make it easier to find resources and content. In addition, with open enrollment now live, The Apply Now links are now featured prominently on the website that are new. So these links here, and if you go click those links, you'll be directed to this Apply for Incentives page. This new page provides an overview on open enrollment, and here you will find all the resources to support open enrollment. Down here, it includes the application guide. Here's a screenshot that you can download, and also to the right button is to download the application. So this is a screenshot that we'll be going over later in today. It is a Microsoft Excel file. Another updated page to take a look at is the resources page. Here you'll find important program documents, including the updated program manual. So it's available for download here. This is version 2023.0. And to go along with the program manual, we also updated the incentives at a glance document that we had previously. And this is now updated with the new incentives and offerings that are also in the program manual. So I do recommend checking out those resources. And speaking of the program manual, I'm going to hand it off to Julia to do a quick recap on what's changed there.
Thanks, Mecca. All right, so I'm going to pick up where Mecca left off and talk a little bit about the finalized manual. If you attended the program updates webinar back in May, I'm not going to go into the level of detail I did there, but like Mecca mentioned, if you missed the webinar, you can find the recording under the events and training section on our website, and we do encourage you to take a look if you missed it. And so since our last webinar, we did receive some really great feedback during the public comments period. And so we did make some minor changes, particularly to the menu and the bundled path measures. So just be sure that you're looking at the finalized version of the manual, which is version 2023.0, and it was published on July 12th, like you see on the screen here. And then and then you can find what you're seeing on the screen here is a screenshot of our website where you can find the finalized manual. Is under the resources tab, and you just click on that program manual, and it'll download the PDF for you. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so I'm just going to briefly recap the updates since the last iteration of the program. So before even the public comments time. We haven't changed the structure of the program, meaning we still have the menu, the bundled, and the whole building paths. And the measures in the menu and bundled paths changed significantly since the last iteration of the program, but the whole building path is remaining pretty much unchanged, or definitely unchanged. Next slide, please. And then you can find the complete list of changes since the last iteration of the program on the 5th page of the finalized manual. And then on a high level, we changed some eligibility requirements. We also made major changes to the menu and bundled path measures. And we also introduced tailored measures for the menu and the bundled paths. And for any project going through any pathway, we've also began offering bonus incentives. All right, next slide, please. We're no longer requiring pre-qualification calls before you apply for incentives. And then so I just want to make sure that we're super clear on the requirements, the eligibility requirements. So I will go into detail about this again. So first, we define multifamily to mean 5 or more connected units. And we are also able to serve projects if they are made up of 5 or more buildings on a site that's duplexes, triplexes, or quads. We just can't serve single family structures. Next, your project's electric utility provider has to be either Portland General Electric or Pacific Power in Oregon. And then also your project has to have hardwired electric heating. Our affordability agreement is that residents in at least 50% of the dwelling units have to be at or below 80% area median income. And these units have to remain affordable for a minimum of 10 years after you participate in the program. And then I do want to add, though, that if your project does not currently meet this requirement, but you are interested in entering into an affordability agreement with OHCS, get in touch with us, and we do have a pathway available for you. Next, we can only provide incentives for measures that result in electric savings. And lastly, if your project is already in construction, and this is a new requirement, new non-requirement, I guess, that if your project is already in construction, you are still eligible to apply. And then if you have any questions about program eligibility as you're getting into the open enrollment application, or if you want to learn more about that affordability requirement, please reach out to us. Our contact information is on the last slide of this presentation, and we can discuss it further. All right, so I'm going to pass it back to Mecca, and she'll talk about the open enrollment process.
Thanks, Julia. Yes, so the last update that we have is that open enrollment round 1 is now open. We are very excited that we were able to launch this last week. I know it's long awaited for many of our projects on the wait list. So here is the timeline as an overview. Open enrollment round 1 launched last week, last Wednesday, July 12th, and it will be open for 45 days until Monday, August 28th. After the enrollment period closes, that's when we'll be reviewing applications, and we anticipate notifying selected projects within 30 days of open enrollment closing. So that's looking at a date of Wednesday, September 27th. So now I'll get into the details of open enrollment and the application process. I'm going to first start talking about the requirements and the criteria. If you joined us in our May webinar, the overview on the criteria will look similar. We have some new additions there, and then we'll close things out with a demo of the actual application. So just to place open enrollment in the overall participation process for OR-MEP. You might be familiar with this graphic from the previous iteration of OR-MEP. So what has changed is that open enrollment is now the first stage in the process to participate in OR-MEP, and only selected open enrollment applicants are eligible for the next program stages to the right, which includes reserving incentives and installing upgrades. So the stages after open enrollment have not changed, but do keep in mind that that is the first stage to get started in participating in the program. All right, so as we previously shared in the last program update webinar in May, the demand and interest in the program has grown significantly, and we now have more projects interested in the program than funding available. We've been operating on a wait list for at least 2 years now, so that is the reason for shifting to open enrollment. It has shifted now, the program is now shifting to from a previously first come first serve process to one that is now competitive with new DEI focused criteria to prioritize projects with the highest need. The open enrollment prioritization criteria was co-created between the program team and also the OR-MEP DEI coalition that we formed last year. They were really helpful and instrumental in helping us get to this point, and really appreciate their time that they spent to support us with this. And finally, open enrollment rounds are scheduled to be open twice annually, every 6 months. And I have a slide coming up about the funding calendar. But this table here shows the scoring categories and weighting. I'll be going over each of the 8 scored criteria next, but you'll see that there's prioritization towards serving BIPOC community and residents, communities with high energy burden, rural communities, and naturally occurring affordable housing properties, which are considered currently unsubsidized or unregulated affordable housing. So you can find the complete details of that I'll be reviewing today in the Open Enrollment Application Guide. It's found on the Apply page within the OR-MEP website. So that's definitely a key resource to check out as you're going through the application process. And here's an overview of the 5-year funding calendar from 2023 to 2027. So we're in this first round right here for round 1 of 2023. We plan to have funding rounds every 6 months, this to ensure equitable distribution of the total $14 million that we have available in funding for the next 5 years. You'll see that we front-loaded funding in the first year, knowing that we do have an existing wait list. And in the first round, we'll have $2.5 million available. And based on historical per apartment unit incentive trends of projects, we're targeting to enroll 825 units in the first round. So this table on the bottom notes the set-aside categories for this first round to distribute that $2.5 million. And it's equally split among Pacific Power and PGE. And then within that, new construction and existing multifamily. So 625,000 within each of the 4 categories. So if you have a potential project, you might be asking yourself, should I apply for OR-MEP open enrollment funding in this round? So we do encourage project teams to apply for this round if your project meets the following prerequisites. If you are selected for OR-MEP funding in this round, the first prerequisite is that the project will finalize development of the energy efficiency scope to reserve incentives within 6 months of open enrollment selection. The second prerequisite is that the project will start construction or upgrades within 18 months of open enrollment selection. I do want to call out the second one. This is a prerequisite that based on public comment we received that we did update. Initially, we had a within 1 year start date based on the start of installing energy efficiency upgrades. So we extended that to 18 months and looking more towards the start of construction around that, not necessarily the start of installing energy upgrades. We do know that there's lots of factors and these are complex projects. So it's now focused on start of construction or upgrades within 18 months of open enrollment selection. And the intent is that projects that are applying are viable projects and can move forward if selected for funding within the timeline. If you have a project that's not ready to commit to these timelines, or you're uncertain if your project can move forward, whether it be due to commitments of other larger funding sources, we do ask that you wait for the next open enrollment round to apply. We will be offering them every 6 months. We do want to prioritize projects that are ready to move forward immediately after being selected. Projects with an uncertain timeline takes away a slot from another project that could benefit from funding in this round. And I'll just note that OHCS will be enforcing these deadlines for any project selected. And we do just want to ensure if we see patterns of not meeting deadlines or not making progress to move forward, you may be disqualified from participating in future enrollment rounds. All right, so now I'm going to go over each of the 8 prioritization criteria that will be scored. I will also be walking through it during the live application demo. But criteria number 1 looks at the location of the property in a BIPOC community, and the score will be noted in the application based on the project address provided. So the data source that's working behind the scenes in the workbook is based on data found in the Affordable Housing Assessment Map, specifically the ethnicity, race, census tract layer. And just for some additional context, that map is a supplement to the 10-year plan for reducing energy burden in Oregon. And that report and this map was created in response to Executive Order 1720. And you can find more details about that in the application guide if you're interested in it. So the intent of this criteria is to prioritize projects located in BIPOC communities. And as an example to the right, this property in Salem is located in a census tract with 21.1% BIPOC. And comparing against this table here, this project falls under the 15 to 25% range and would be eligible for 1 point. Criteria number 2 looks at how the project will serve BIPOC communities. Scores will be noted in the application based on self-attestation by the applicant on current percent of BIPOC residents if you have an existing property, or anticipated percent of BIPOC residents for new construction properties. So applicants should make the selection to the best of their current knowledge and the goals of the property. We also are asking that you provide a brief narrative response on how you will ensure that the selected percent of BIPOC residents will be met. And that speaks to this question in the middle. How do you plan to ensure that members of these communities are aware of the housing opportunity? And the intent of this criteria is to prioritize projects that are explicitly designed and located to address displacement of BIPOC residents and communities, and to ensure underserved BIPOC communities are represented as residents. Depending on the percentage of BIPOC residents in the property, as shown in this table, a project can be eligible for anywhere from 0 to 5 points. So I did just want to call out this category criteria is one of 2 items where we request a narrative backup. So you'll notice when in the application, there is sort of this disclaimer that narrative responses that are blank, incomplete, or with insufficient detail to back up the percent selection will be scored 0 points by program staff. So I do just ask that as you're making the selection, do it to the best of your knowledge. Some consideration factors as we're reviewing the application that you might want to consider is your selection of the anticipated BIPOC residents reasonable based on the actual BIPOC size of community? So for example, if there are 10% BIPOC in the project census tract area, which you'll see in criteria number 1, and you selected that for this criteria number 2, that you plan to have at least 75% BIPOC residents, we just ask that you please provide sufficient detail on how you will achieve that in your narrative response. And then the second item to check for is, did you provide sufficient detail in your narrative response? So we do reference HUD's Affirmative Fair Housing Marketing Plan. That is a more involved document than we're asking for, but it is a good guide and document for what to consider. And provide some guidance for like how to be specific of community contact you plan to engage as well. So if you have any questions on this, feel free to contact us. We'd be happy to support you ahead of the application deadline. And then moving on to criteria number 3, this looks at a project's high priority area index score, which is a cumulative index assessing energy burden. So the score will be noted in the application based on the project address provided. The data source for this is also found from the Affordable Housing Assessment Map, specifically the high priority area index layer. And the intent of this criteria is to prioritize projects with high priority area index score, which, as I mentioned, is a metric. And this is a metric that was defined in the 10-year plan, linked here in response to Executive Order 1720. So this index was created to more easily identify locations in Oregon with the greatest energy burden, and it includes a measure of energy burden itself, along with other factors that are known to drive energy burden, affordability hardship due to low household income, which is an economic driver, poor home energy efficiency due to older home vintage, which is the physical driver, and housing inequity issues due to ethnicity, race, a systemic driver. So as an example, this property in Salem is located in a census tract with a high priority area index of 2.75. And comparing against this table, the project falls in the 2 to 2.99 range and is eligible for 3 points. And then criteria number 4 is that project is in a rural area. Scores will be noted in the application based on the project address provided. The data source behind this is aligning with OHCS's definition of rural from the 2022 Qualified Allocation Plan linked here. And the intent of this criteria is to prioritize projects in rural areas that is currently underserved by OR-MEP. And due to their location, they're located away from urban centers, and these projects are typically more resource constrained due to higher labor costs tied to workforce shortages compared to projects in urban areas. So as an example, this project in Salem is not considered rural, so the project is eligible for 0 points. Criteria number 5 is for projects that are naturally occurring affordable housing. This is known by the program as NOAA properties. And what this means is this is a yes or no response made by the applicant answering the question, is this property currently unsubsidized rental housing with no active affordable regulatory agreement with a federal, state, or local agency? The program defines NOAA properties as unsubsidized rental housing that is affordable to residents with incomes between 60 and 120% area median income and who typically can pay no more than 30% of the income on rent and utilities. NOAA property owners have typically never participated in affordable housing programs, and the intent of this criteria is to prioritize these projects, and by enrolling them in OR-MEP, the projects agree to meet the OR-MEP affordability requirements by entering into a 10-year affordability agreement with OHCS, and this creates a mechanism to preserve affordable housing in Oregon. Criteria number 6 looks at if the applicant entity is a nonprofit or housing authority. This is a simple yes or no response, and it's eligible for 2 points for nonprofits or housing authorities. And the intent of this criteria is to prioritize nonprofits and housing authorities that are often more resource constrained than for-profit applicant entities. Criteria number 7 asks if the project is planned to be a highly energy efficient performing building, such as net zero energy or passive house. This is also a yes or no response, with yes responses eligible for 2 points. Applicants who respond yes will need to describe how their project is planned to be highly energy efficient performing, such as net zero or passive house or equivalent, and also describing the type of energy upgrades the project is considering. The intent of this criteria is to prioritize projects that are going beyond to reduce the energy burden for residents through the highest energy efficient building design. So this is the second of 2 criteria that request a backup narrative response. So similarly, if we see that you select yes and the narrative response is blank, incomplete, or with insufficient detail, we will adjust the score to 0. So things to consider when you're providing your narrative response is the project planned to be net zero energy, passive house, or equivalent? And just as a note, for new construction projects, if they're designed to meet the energy code or slightly above code, that typically is not considered net zero or passive house. So if you have some questions you want to talk through, if you qualify for this, we're happy to chat about that. Also, if you have working with an energy consultant, I think they would be able to answer that for you as well. And then other things to consider when you're responding is, did you describe the type of energy upgrades the project is considering to reach that high efficiency level? And did you describe how the project is equipped to achieve these energy goals? All right, now at the last criteria, number 8, this is for first-time participation in OR-MEP and for applicant entities that have never previously received OR-MEP funding. This is a simple yes or no response with 2 points available for first-time participants. So I know I covered a lot there. You can learn more in the application guide, but I'll move on now to talk about the application process, and then we'll move on to the live demo of the application. So application submission process, shared these enrollment timelines earlier slide. So just as a reminder, Open enrollment is open for 45 days. So it closes on Monday, August 28th, 2023. So applications must be submitted no later than that date at 5 p.m. Pacific time. And any applications submitted after this time will not be evaluated. You can submit completed applications to the program email, OHCS Multifamily Energy at trccompanies.com. And then what does the review process look like? So following the closing date of enrollment on August 28th, our team will take a look at, review the applications. They will be reviewed and competitively ranked. And then applications with the highest scores within each set aside category will be recommended for funding as the allocated resources allow. So we anticipate issuing notice of selected projects within 30 days of enrollment and targeting to complete that by Wednesday, September 27th. And over the next few weeks, as you are completing your application, we do have support available. We will be hosting office hours weekly until the close of open enrollment. This will be offered via Zoom, so you can stop by to ask a question about the application process, eligibility, or anything else you have on your mind. So we have these times listed on the apply page of OR-MEP, and the links will send you to Zoom so you can register if you'd like to join. And if you have any questions in the meantime, you can also contact us via phone or email. Okay, with that, I'm going to do a live demo of the open enrollment application. This screenshot shows the Excel file for that. And I'm going to jump away from this PowerPoint presentation, and if you want to follow along, I'm going to be going to the program website at the apply page to get started. All right, so I'm actually going to start at the home page. So if you are at the home page, OregonMultifamilyEnergy.com, you can click either this Apply Now button or this one here, and you will be directed to the Apply for Incentives page. And while I'm here, I'll just call out, this is where you can find all the details on open enrollment. You can download the application guide here, which opens up here. This has all the details that we went over in this presentation today. And then I won't click on that yet, but this is where the link that you would click to download the application. As we're scrolling down, it provides some more information on open enrollment. And then under this application support section, that's where you can find the links if you want to register for office hours over the next few weeks. And so I'm going to click download application. I have that opened up on the side. So I'm gonna open that file that got downloaded. So when I open that file, you should open in Microsoft Excel. And I'm gonna call out the instructions here. The first thing that you'll wanna do is to click Enable Editing and Enable Content after opening this workbook at the top. So you can see right here, it says Enable Content. So I'm gonna click that. And I also wanna make this a trusted document. The reason for doing that is that for the second bullet, you must have an internet connection while working in this application. The reason for that is for the criteria that has background lookups, that is based off of the affordable housing assessment map that I previously mentioned. So it's taking a lookup of the address and the census tract that it's located in based on that mapping data. So if you see invalid address warnings in your application, confirm your internet connection and also confirm that you entered the address inputs correctly as well. So this application, you should submit an application for each project, and the program defines a project as one building or a group of buildings on a property. So you should submit it with that in mind. And the fields that a user needs to fill out are these light green shaded cells. All the other cells are locked and have automated calculations based on what you enter in these fields. And if you run into any issues, feel free to let us know and we can help you resolve those. So I do want to just call out a couple of other things before I start jumping into entering information here. This warnings column here in red, that's meant so you, if you're filling this out, can sort of self-quality control your application. It will provide alerts of what might be missing. So when you open it up, you'll see lots of alerts and warnings about responses that need to be entered. And that culminates to the ultimate, if this says application incomplete, please do review what's in this column and resolve that. When you're ready to submit, it should say application complete. So with that in mind, let's start filling out this application. And I'm gonna fill out an application for a made-up project, not a real project. So I'm just gonna call it not a real name. So this project is gonna be located in Salem, 123 apartments at 900 Port Street, Northeast, which is the same example project I was showing in the PowerPoint. So it's located. For the street address, you want to enter just the street level address. If you have multiple addresses and buildings at this site, please enter one address for the main building. And also for new construction projects where the address may not yet be established, please enter the nearest actual address to the proposed site. This lookup function only recognizes currently recognized addresses. So if you run into any errors there, like with this invalid address, that may be the reason why. So I'm going to type in the city. We can only accept projects in Oregon, so that's pre-fill. And you'll see just with that street information alone, we now have the census tract ID, which is what's being used to auto-calculate some of the criteria. I'm just going to add the zip code as well. And this is a new construction project. And you'll see as I enter responses, these warnings on the right are also disappearing and showing that it is resolved. Okay. So that is the project information section. And you'll always, this top part, the application summary, will just start to fill in your points as you're working through the application. So next we'll move on to the applicant information. And this first section asks to enter the information for the applicant entity that would receive program incentives if you are selected for funding. So I'm going to enter this made-up company. And for the entity type, I'm going to select a for-profit. That's the current assumption I'm going with for this made-up project. And the first applicant contact that we ask that you fill in is the authorized signatory. So this should be the person that can sign on behalf of the project and have the ability to bind the project to the OR-MEP program agreements, and who we would be coordinating with if you are selected, and all the documentation that would require signature to move the project forward. And then the second line, we do know that sometimes the signatory is not the primary contact that's coordinating the application. So this line is for the primary contact for our team to coordinate with regarding this application. So I'm going to enter person there. And this person may be with the same company as the entity that would receive incentive, or they might not be. So if they're not with the same entity that would receive incentive, we would just ask that you provide their information as well. All right, so we filled out the applicant information, contact information that we needed. So now we'll move on to the section for program eligibility. As Julia had mentioned, we are no longer requiring pre-qualification for projects before open enrollment. So we do want to make sure projects that do apply for OR-MEP open enrollment are confirming that they're eligible for the program. So this is sort of your self-selection confirming that you meet the program eligibility. If you have any questions on any of these items, we can talk to you between now and the application close date if you want more clarification if your project is eligible. So first up is the project located in Oregon? I'm going to say yes. Second question is the project a multifamily property with at least 5 residential units per building, or a campus of 5 or more duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes, and no single family units included in the unit count. So I'm going with the assumption that this is a 30 unit in one building, so I'm going to say yes. And does this project currently or will receive electric service from Portland General Electric or Pacific Power? If it's a current building receiving it, easy to answer there. And if it's a new construction project, we just ask that you confirm that PGE or Pacific Power will be the electric service provider to the property. We will request backup documentation after we get through the process as well. So this one is in Pacific Power. And then, are the apartment units currently or will be heated by a hardwired electrical heating system? So I'm going to say yes, they are electrically heated. And does the project meet OR-MEP affordability requirements where the residents residing in at least 50% of the dwelling units are at or below 80% area median income and will remain affordable for at least 10 years? So also going to say yes there. And finally, if selected for funding, do you plan to install energy upgrades that result in electric savings? As a reminder, the program can only incentivize energy upgrades that result in electric savings. If your project has gas heating in it, we can't serve those components. So yes here. All right, so that covers the program eligibility. If you did answer maybe no to one of these, you would get a warning here saying that the project is not eligible. And at the top, it would say that the application is incomplete. Okay, moving on to the not scored criteria. This first one is open enrollment prerequisites that we had talked about earlier. And this is based off of the date of when the project is selected for open enrollment, if it is selected. So we do provide this date as a reference point for you. This is our target date of when we will select projects. So prerequisite number 1 asks, will project finalize development of the energy efficiency scope to reserve incentives within 6 months of open enrollment selection? So I'm going to say yes there. And then for more of our planning purposes, we do ask a follow-up question there of how soon you anticipate the project will finalize the incentive reservation. And from this drop down, there are options at various monthly timeframes. So you can make the selection to the best of your knowledge. I'm going to say for this project, it's within 3 to 4 months. And then prerequisite number 2 is, will the project start construction or upgrades within 18 months of open enrollment selection? So I'm going to say yes here. And we do ask for dates also for planning purposes, your start date and your completion date. And just as, so I want to say, show a scenario where it doesn't meet the prerequisite. So if it was April 1st, 2025, you'll see a warning saying that that does not meet the prerequisite. That's beyond the 18 months after this date. And then, so if that's accurate, then you want to reassess if this round is the right time to be applying. But that was just as an example. So I'm gonna say this project will be ready starting April 1st of next year. So that is within meeting prerequisites. And I will say that this will be completed, say 2 years after that. All right, so moving on, the next set of questions are informational questions. This is also just to help in our planning purposes. We asked, does the project have all funding sources in place to move forward with design and construction? To incorporate OR-MEP design and elements if selected for open enrollment. So there's a yes or no there. And a follow-up question there is just describing where you are with your funding sources, what's confirmed, and then what is pending as well. So this is a narrative response. So I'm gonna not provide a complete narrative here and just keep it at that for this example. This is where I would describe the project funding. And item number 2 asks, do you have an energy consultant and third-party verifier lined up for this project? The options are, you can select from yes, no, I need help to find one, no, not yet, but I have someone in mind, no, I do not plan to work with an energy consultant or verifier. This is also just so we can plan what needs are for energy consultants. And let's say do have an energy consultant, and we're gonna call them XYZ energy consultants. All right, so that covers the not scored criteria portion of the application. And then this is where we get into the scored criteria. You'll start to see, as a reminder, you only need to fill in cells that are shaded in this green color with the yellow outline. So for this first criteria, project is in a BIPOC community. That was auto-calculated based on the address that you entered. So for that project, it's located in a census tract with 21.10% BIPOC, and the eligible category that the project is eligible for is this 15 to 24 range, eligible for 1 point. So all these red rows are the points for that criteria, which will sum up at the top. So number 2 criteria is project is primarily serving BIPOC communities. This like I mentioned when I was going over the slides, this is a self-attestation selection that we ask that you answer to the best of your knowledge. You can select 0%, at least 25%, 50%, or 75%, ranging in points for 0 to 5 points. So I'm going to select for this project 25%. That seems reasonable based off of the percent BIPOC in the census tract for this project. And then this is where we would ask you to enter a narrative response. We trying to keep it limited to 200 words, so we do have a word count here for you. Not requesting a lengthy description, but the essential details. So refer back to the slides for guidance. For the sake of time, I'm just gonna input the start of a sentence there. All right, moving on to criteria number 3. This is for the high priority area index energy burden score. This is also another one that's calculated. So based on the address, the high priority index score in the census tract is 2.75. So it's eligible for the category 2 to 2.99 range for 3 points. So this doesn't require any additional input. And then the next one, likewise, project is in a rural area. This is also automatically calculated based on the address. So this is not located in a rural area, so it's eligible for 0 points. Moving on to criteria number 5, project is in a naturally occurring affordable housing. So I'm going to select no for that. Assuming I'm under the assumption that this is not a unsubsidized housing. And then applicant entity is a nonprofit or housing authority. So this is also a yes or no response. And for this example, I'm going to say no. So eligible, 0 points there. And then criteria number 7 is project is planned to be a highly energy efficient building. This is also a yes or no response. I'm going to say yes here. And this is where we ask for that narrative backup. And for the sake of time, I'm just gonna input the start of a response, but work on it later. Make sure I meet what's required. And the final criteria is first-time participant. I am going to say that I am a first-time participant, so I'm eligible for 2 points. So at this point, as I'm scrolling up and you're looking at this column D, you can see that there are no warnings here. So that means I have filled in all of the inputs and I get an application complete. So that means I have completed this application with the current inputs that I made. I'm calculated at 9 total points. But I will also add a caveat that my narrative responses are not sufficient and I would need to update that. So I'm gonna delete that for now because I know I need to work on them. And so I now have these warnings to please enter the response. And you will see that the warning says the application is incomplete. So just ask that you please review for completeness of your application and check to make sure you submit once it says the application is complete. So that wraps up my overview. Once you're done and you've completed your application, you can submit it via email to the program email here. If you click on this link, it will open up an email message in your local email platform, or you can just copy and paste it. Yeah, and that covers our presentation for today. I know a little over than I hope planned for. We have a few more minutes for questions, so I know we have some in the chat. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in there now.
Great, thank you, Mecca. We'll start with a couple questions that came in while you were presenting. So first question is, for any site that does not have an assigned site address, should they use an adjacent site address? Could you give some guidance on that?
Yeah, if you could provide the nearest recognized address for the site, that will help. That only currently recognized address in the census will be able to calculate.
Great, thank you. And as you were reviewing some of the different criteria, you referenced a few different maps and resources. So can you explain how people can access those maps and resources to evaluate their project before submitting their application?
Yeah, I'm gonna jump to this application guide. So the workbook does have all of these auto calculated for you. So you could just put your address in here and see where you land with your points. You can also find those links for the maps within this document here. I'm just trying to, this is the, sorry, I should share what this is the OR-MEP Open Enrollment Application Guide found on the Apply page. And if you go to any of the criteria, it is hyperlinked there for you to find it. So for this example, project is in a BIPOC community. If you click this link, it will take you to the map. So we do have some guidance on our FAQ page if you have questions about the map as well and how to use that under Learn How to Participate, FAQs. Under Open Enrollment, there is this question, how do I search for census tract level criteria that's used in Open Enrollment? And this gives you guidance there too as well.
Awesome, thank you. Next question, is there a tie-breaking process?
Yeah, good question. Gonna continue back to this document under the Apply Now page. You can find that detailed in the application guide as well. Rolling down to get there. Okay, so this covers the tie breaking. If there is a tie break, we'll first look at the earlier construction start date, and then if those happen to be the same for tying projects, then we'll look at the higher total points in BIPOC or high priority area index.
Great, thank you. I don't see any other questions at this point, Mecca, so we could probably go ahead and wrap up.
All right. Well, thank you all for those questions. Something else.
Oh, one more question. Will the application be the same for future funding rounds?
Yeah, that's a great question. We do have the 6-month gaps between open enrollment, and we're also using that opportunity to take lessons learned from each round and apply them to the next round. So there might be some tweaks. That is something that we will work out with the coalition, and we also welcome your feedback based on your experience with this round as well. We know it's a new process, so we know there's some learning curves with that too.
Great, thank you.
All right, well, thank you all for joining again. As just a reminder, here's our contact information if you want to reach out to us. And likewise, you can register for one of the office hours that are happening over the next few weeks if you have any questions. Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.